So this is the basis of the next assignment, and I'll explain to you, the steps of the assignment. But first, we want to just talk about these are either circumstances that existed then in 1840, or they exist also now. So they're either similar because it happened then and it's still happening, or they're different because it only was happening then, but it's no longer happening now. Do you see what we're doing? Okay, so as an example, we'll just go from the beginning. Now, we can have discussion about this. Some of these will be subjective, so there's not exactly a right or wrong answer. And how you are assessed on this will be the quality of your explanation for why you're picking similar or different, okay? So for example, would you say that this happened in the past? You had a group feeling that government wasn't representing them. In the past, that would have been the majority of colonists, right? So it was happening then. Is it happening now? Do you have a group of people in Canada who feel that government is not representing them? Yeah. Hey, yeah, right? Okay, so in the now, you could just say Alberta or something like that, right? So that would be similar.
Yeah.
See how that goes? Okay, number 2. So in the then, if we go like that is then and this is now, as an example, then you had people that were influenced by government events. You had rebels who saw revolution work for them with the Patriots. They thought we need radical revolution to force the British to give us responsible government. So then were they influenced by government events? Yes. Are we still influenced by American events?
Yes.
What? Great consensus. So similar. But then you would have to explain how. How today are we influenced by American events? Tariffs, Trump's threats.
She pointed at me first.
She said it first. Trump's threats. What about the Freedom Convoy?
Huh?
Was the Freedom Convoy influenced by American events?
Yeah, like the
January 6th riot on the Capitol.
my birthday riot.
There you go, right? Yeah. So again, there you have. That's where I say this is. There's not exactly a right answer, because you could say that the tariffs are the influence on Canada, or you could say that the Capitol riots were the influence on the Freedom Convoy, or something like that, right? Okay, continuing on. So in the then and now, then was the representation of the majority of people. So they wanted. This didn't happen then.
So it's different because
It's different. Yeah. Because are you agreeing that today we have representation by the majority?
No.
It was the
Pass.
popular vote. No, it was the popular vote. The popular vote votes in the, what's that? Majority? Yeah. Okay. Then and now, government deciders were appointed for life. Do we have any politicians that are appointed to their positions? Some senators are. You guys don't know much about senators,
I don't know much
but
about politics.
they aren't necessarily a life position. You can be removed from it, and they're certainly not too relevant. But you did have, in the past, did you have people appointed to their positions, not elected? Matthew's adding yes, because it was those British elite. And those British elite had veto powers. They were able to keep out the powers or the will of the majority of people. But we don't quite have the same thing today. Today we elect our politicians. If somebody is abusing their power, they can be removed from their position, whether by pressure or by legal methods, right? So this one would be different. Government making decisions that avoid status quo. And what this means, if they avoid status quo, it means that they create change. So then, were there government choices that created change?
Yeah.
Like what? It created change. Act of union created change, yes. Now, do we still have that today?
Yeah.
Government makes decisions creating change. You could even talk to, again, Alberta, a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, or something like her act is called, something like that. But you could argue that, so similar. The number of impatient voters anxious for government change. Similar, yes, because then you had people who went so far as to use violence. You had rebels and stuff like that. Have we had some kind of a demonstration in the last 4 years where people were impatient for changed through the democratic way? Yes, because that was the Freedom Convoy, right? Yeah. So similar. So you're seeing how this assignment works?
Yep.
Okay, similar, different. French speakers fighting to maintain their cultural distinction. Different?
Well, they still do. Well, they still do because Block still runs in the election.
Not separate themselves, Jess?
We base it off like the indigenous groups.
French speakers. This one here is specific to French speakers, just for the French. So in the past, the French were fighting against assimilation.
But
Are
we're
they?
not trying to assimilate them now, so it'd be different.
They're still fighting for it.
They are still. For example, we know. I think you guys know, or I assume you guys know about. For the last 3-4 years, Quebec has used the notwithstanding clause to deny the charter rights of people by saying if you work for the government, you can't wear any religious symbols, right? Because there is diversity in Quebec, but they don't want to see it because Catholicism is still the primary religion, or they want it to seem that way, right? Or also, they've just recently, remember in the last, 2 years, used the notwithstanding clause for a language law, that if you work for the government as well, you have to give French language instruction first. So if you are a doctor in Quebec and you have an English-only speaking patient that comes into your clinic, you can only give advice in English and it has to be translated. You give prescriptions in French first, and they have people that go in kind of like secret shoppers. And if they catch you giving instruction in English and not French only, you can be, penalized, something like that. So that again would be a similar thing. The party of Tories. Now, Tories, again, it was about tradition, sameness, right? The Tories are today's conservatives. So there were Tories back then who were fighting to maintain status quo. And you still have Tories today. Yes. Yes and yes. So similar. Provincial areas of government responsibility. So when they did start creating, eventually they'll create the provinces there, and they gave a division of what provinces looked after versus what the federal government looked after. So if that existed in the past, does it still exist today? Are the provinces responsible for things that the federal government is not? Education, healthcare, resources, yes, so similar. Okay, eventually we're going to have the provinces of Ontario and Quebec that are going to split from this East and West Canada. But let's say that the Canada East and Canada West, these two ridings, become Ontario and Quebec. They had equal powers, even though Quebec had more population. So that was true in the past. Does Ontario and Quebec have pretty equal provincial powers? They have absolutely equal provincial powers, same as any other province, right? So that would be a similar one. Are there federal laws that apply equally to Ontario and Quebec? That's a no-brainer, yeah. Still. And maybe these aren't really relevant ones. You eventually will pick 15 of these. So you have lots of choices to pick from, right? Are there federal government laws that protect Indigenous groups? We know that the federal government today protects Indigenous groups. It didn't at the time, though, so we would say no to the past, right? Indigenous people, at this point, there's no treaties, which means that they have no relationship to Indigenous groups, so that'd be a difference. Okay, back then, Ontario and Quebec had the majority of population. We don't have anything other than, well, there's New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, there is Rupert's Land, that kind of stuff, but they weren't allowing people to live in the West. It's very small populations on those islands. So did Ontario and Quebec have the majority of population at the time?
Yeah.
And do they still?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a similarity. Okay, here's another one. Back then, were there groups that felt left out of the decision-making process?
Yeah, they're
French, or just the regular colonists who weren't the English-speaking elite? Are there still people today that feel left out of decision-making process?
Yeah.
Are there people in this room who feel left out of the decision-making process? Okay, so it's similar. Okay, back then we had groups that rallied for the separation from Canada.
Similar.
Yeah.
Similar. And actually, this is so interesting because I made this assignment in like 2022, like not knowing how it would change in 2025. Okay, back then, are we approaching? Okay, thank you for that. Back then, did we have a government ruled by a small group of people that looked after their own needs? Yes. Do we still have government that looks after the needs of just the rich and wealthy?
No.
Or a small group of people?
Oh, right now. No.
Kind of. In a way.
It can feel that way, but it is a democratic process, and it's the majority of people have voted for that group to meet the majority's needs, right? So government ruled by a small elite? No, not really. Different. Number of representatives of a region relates to the number of the population. So it didn't in the past. Remember I said there were more people living in the French territory, but they gave them equal numbers of politicians for their votes. So that was not the case in the past, but is it the case today? Do you have a similar number of, like we said, once too many people are populating MPs riding, they split the riding. The idea is that you have a number of MPs, 300 and some, that represent groups of people, but it's a fairly even balance of how many people each representative looks after, right? So that's the case today. Pierre Poilievre, for example, his riding might have 200,000 people in it, the old one, and the new one he's hoping to win might also have 200,000 people in it, but because it's in rural Alberta, territory will be much larger to get that number of people in there, right? Equal number of people to represent, not equal size. Back then, was there a rebellion against political style of leadership?
Yeah.
Yes. Today, are there rebellions against political leadership styles?
Yes.
There have been recently, yeah.
Look at the Trump attack. The guy tried to shoot him.
No, but that's American. We're talking Canadian stuff. This here is where I would talk convoy, right?
Isn't that one guy said he wanted to go visit Trudeau and he was going to shoot him?
That also did happen.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I am a person of my word. So you see how this goes? This will be okay. And then there's different categories that you will take your 15 and they fall under certain things. We'll talk about that and you'll have...
Can I have my sheet because I want to be here tomorrow? That's
Oh, it starts already.
Yeah, if I could just have it.
Yeah, you didn't do your work six last year?
Okay.
Hopefully at college 25 is around.
There will be a video.
College 25.
Yeah, I'll have, I come in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Download or
All right.